Hey everybody, it's Buchard, author of the #1 New York Times bestselling book, The Millionaire Messenger, and founder of Experts Academy. And it's my honor and true thrill to be sitting here with one of the great legends of all of publishing, Brian Tracy. As you know, Brian Tracy is the international bestselling author of over 52 books, been translated into 38 languages, serving now over 58 countries around the world. And this is someone who has really figured out the publishing game. And I know you're watching this because you're trying to figure out, well, how do I get my message out there or put a book out? What's the editing process? What's the publishing process? What's the promotion process? And everyone's always wondering, well, how do you do this? Well, here's a person who's done it over 52 times, who really understands exactly what goes into the journey and how to make you a best-selling, internationally best-selling author. And I'll tell you, one of the things I've learned so much from this person. I know I couldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for his work, so I'm honored to be here and welcome Brian Tracy.
Thank you very much, Brendan, for being here. And I'm just so impressed with your book, The Millionaire Messenger, which I bought 3 copies of, just in case I wore 1 or 2 of them out. and you brought it out. You made it a New York Times bestseller. So why did you write the book? Who did you write it for? What sort of impact has it had on your life? I mean, that would be a good way for us to start this interview.
Yeah, I think the promise of writing a book is complete life transformation. As soon as you put what you know out there, everyone starts coming to you. They want your business, they want your ideas, they want your thought leadership. It explodes the business and everything goes well. And that's what happened to me. I mean, a lot of people didn't know me before The Millionaire Messenger. And I decided to write the book because I've been teaching Experts Academy for a while. I had this message that said, look, anybody can make a difference with what they know. Anyone could take their knowledge and their experience and their wisdom and their message to the world, and they could package it together and put it in a book or a product or a DVD or an online course or whatever, and they could change the world with that. And so that's what The Millionaire Messenger is about. And I wanted to tell people and look them in the eye and say, look, what you know is valuable, and your experience is the most important asset you have of your life. Learn to monetize it. And that's what The Millionaire Messenger does, and now it's become this big thing, and my blessing is I learned from guys like you who showed me what to do with all of that notoriety and what to do with a best-selling book to build a real business, and it's changed my life.
What you teach and what I teach, and I'm just thinking as you're talking, is we just teach the words, you can do it. And this is how, and this is why, and this is where, and this is what to do, and this is what not to do. But the bottom message is you can do this. In your case, you can be an expert, and you can be successful, and you can monetize your expertise, and you can live a wonderful life. And that's exactly my motivation as well.
Yeah, yours has always been that way. I mean, I remember reading some of your first books, and it changed my life. And I mean, if I could write a book, I'm from Montana, I'm barely, dragging my knuckles from the ground yet. It's like we're cavemen up in Montana. And the fact that I could sit down and literally become a force in the publishing world says that anybody could learn to write a book. Because I never woke up one day and say, well, I'm an author. I said, I have something important to share, and a book is a great vehicle for that, versus me having to go around the world and talk all the time. This book is around the world now. Your books are around the world, and we're making this difference. And I think the greatest thing about what we get to do, and anyone else could write a book and say, hey, you can really do this. You could be an author, and that's what this video is obviously about.
Well, thank you. And when I started writing, it's interesting, when I was growing up, I had this fantasy of writing a book. Because in my early 20s, I used to talk with a friend of mine. We'd talk about one day we'd write a book, or I'd write a book, he'd write a book. And it was 2 decades later before a publisher approached me and said, would you write a book on what you're teaching?
Wow.
And I never thought of that. And I sat down, and it took a long time. It took more than a year of hard slogging to write that book, Maximum Achievement.
Yeah.
And then my friend said, oh, it'll never sell. Books aren't successful. Most books don't. And the book now is in 38 languages. It's in 56 countries. It's sold millions of copies. It has transformed the lives of countless people. You read the book at an early stage. And it's changed my life completely. It's, first of all, financially, it's brought me a steady stream of royalties. Ever since I published in 1989, there's been a steady stream of royalties. First of all, advances and then royalties. But then people read the book, and they want to come to the courses. They want to buy the audio programs. They want to see the DVDs. They want me to come into their companies. And it raises your credibility. And then the success stories, people start saying, wow, I read this book, and this is what happened to me. And some of the success stories are just phenomenal.
Yeah, I would say I'm one of them, if I could call myself a success story. It's been through pretty dramatic teenage years, and I read Maximum Achievement right when I was in college. And when I read that book, literally became a turning point. It was like, oh, I can achieve. What it made me do is dream and know that I could do it. And so that book did exactly what you talked about. It led me into getting to know you. It made me buy your programs. So I bought your audio programs, and I listened to them in my car over and over and over again. And I said, well, does he have seminars? And I go to a website? And that's what people do with authors. It's weird when we think about it as authors. But as soon as we have that book out, it gives us all this reason to serve people in more ways. And you figured this out more than anyone else, because 50 plus books. That's one of the reasons that you are at this legendary status, and why everyone needs to write more than one book.
Yes.
And understand that people can write more than one book.
Yeah.
Could you tell us more about that journey of, okay, I know I want to write a book. So if someone's watching this, they say, I want to write a book. I don't know how. As they're thinking about that, could you tell us about your journey? Because you asked the same questions.
Well, I tend to approach things strategically, which means set a goal, make a plan, put in the steps. So before I wrote my first book, I got an offer from a publisher, Simon & Schuster, and I went to the bookstore, and I was a voracious reader, and I bought about 8 or 10 books on how to write a book. Here's A Writer's Time, How to Write a Book, Strunken White's a book on the elements of style, and I found that there's a whole subculture of books on how to write, and magazines and courses on how to write, and that saved my life, because it explained how much time you spend each day, how you structure a book, how you lay it out, what good sentences and paragraphs are, what good chapters and headings are, and so on. So then I sat down and slogged through my first book. And after the first book, after a year, they came back and they said, well, we'd like a second book. And I thought, well,
you've got another year?
Yeah. So I was speaking on two things, on personal success and on sales success. So I sat down and I wrote a book that many people say is the finest book ever written on selling. I had a good friend who's a sales trainer. He said, after he read that book, he said he could throw away 300 other books in his sales library.
Wow.
Because this book had it all. And I still have people who come up to me, including last week, someone who was literally down and out and cold calling. He's now a vice president of one of the biggest Fortune 500 companies. He said he owes it all to that selling book.
Wow.
So when you write a book, when you don't know what effect it's going to have on people's lives. I had this great story. In my business seminars, I had this gentleman call from New Zealand. He wanted to attend the seminar, and could he bring 8 people? And of course, if you're selling tickets to seminars, you say yes. So he showed up with himself, his wife, and 6 of his executives. His story was tear-jerking. He was a truck driver when he read my book, and he underlined as he went through the key points. And he realized he could never be more than a truck driver if he was driving a truck for someone else. So the first goal he set was to own his own truck, because then he could sell his services and he could earn about double, because he could basically contract out to other trucking companies. So it took him a year. He cut back his expenses. He moved to a smaller place. He saved his money, and he saved enough to be able to buy a truck. Today he owns 350 trucks. He has 1,000 staff. He's the biggest shipper in the country of New Zealand. He's a multi-millionaire.
Wow.
One of the humblest, nicest guys you'll ever meet. And he said he owed it all to coming across that book as a truck driver and reading it at truck stops. Can you imagine that? And I've heard that kind of a story. That's the best I can think of. I've heard that kind of a story 1,000 times from the book that a person writes.
I love that you bring that up, because when most people talk about publishing, they say, oh, I made these tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions in the advance, or this book brought in millions of dollars. And you're talking about a guy who's a truck driver who built a real life from that book. And I think that's what's important about books is, yes, they're unbelievable for business, but they change people's lives. And that's the message I like to share with people, is that everyone has a message or an experience that they had in their life, or they've gone through something in their career or in their personal life that taught them lessons that they can teach other people. So you learn things about business, you wrote them down in a book, this guy learns about business and it transforms his life. And so everyone has that. Everyone has a story that could inspire people, instruct them to improve their lives. The challenge is that everyone, when they go, well, I want to write a book, they get scared.
Yes.
They say, well, it's an unknown entity. I haven't done it before.
Right.
I don't know anything about the industry. I'm not a marketer. And many of them say, well, I'm not a writer. And I always say, you become a writer by writing.
Yes.
But clearly, 52 books, you've learned a process. You've learned the secret behind writing books. What is that for people?
Well,